When social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube first started to pop up, they were advertised as the next great way to communicate with family and friends across the world. Now you can upload photos and even videos for the whole world to see. They said it would bring us all closer together, that we would all be happier for it. But is that what really happened? Let's start at the beginning of social media. The first social media site to be created was 6 Degrees in 1997. Just a few years later, in 2004, 5, and 6, all the main social media apps like Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter were founded. They all exploded into the public sphere and grew incredibly fast. Only 1 year after it was founded, YouTube already had over 25 million videos and was averaging over 20,000 uploads a day. In that same year, they were bought by Google for $1.65 billion. Facebook had an interesting beginning, to say the least, with Mark Zuckerberg being sued by his classmates for allegedly stealing their idea. Also, at first, Facebook was only available to Ivy League students. It wasn't till September of 2006 that it was open to the public. By December of that same year, they already had 12 million users, and that was only going to increase as the years went on. Twitter arguably had a slow beginning for about a year until the South by Southwest Interactive Conference. At that conference, everyone kept up to date with what was happening via Twitters, as they were called. After that, it exploded like all of the others to have over 1 million tweets being posted per quarter in 2008. And you may be thinking, he forgot about Instagram. No, I didn't. Instagram actually came a couple years after the first bunch, with it being founded in 2010. For the first 2 years, it grew relatively slowly compared to the others. The founders, Kevin Systrom and Mike Krieger, were gathering funding during that time. It was only in 2012, when Facebook bought it for $1 billion, did it start to grow rapidly. And after, it started to add over 10 million users each month. Now that we've gone over a brief history of all the major social media giants, let's take a deeper dive into how social media works and how that brought us to where we are today. So, how does social media work? Well, the short version is you follow people, you see their posts, but social media also promotes content that it thinks you'll like, using algorithms. At first, none of that seems bad or even worrying, but it is. Let me explain. But before I do, there is one last piece to how social media works, and that is the moral and emotional words in a tweet or post. Let's say you're scrolling through your Twitter. There'll be many posts. Perhaps you'll like some of them. Most won't really grab your attention until you reach this one post. It's about gun control. It says, if you don't agree to common sense gun control, you're literally evil. You don't care if children die. There's something very important in that post, which are the words evil and die. The words evil and die are the emotional/moral component of that post. Those words are what grabs your attention to that post. You read them and then you most likely retweet the post because of it. That's the effect that moral/emotional words have. A study from NYU on this topic concluded that the presence of moral emotional words in messages increased their diffusion by a factor of 20% for each additional word. After that, when the algorithms see that people are retweeting that post more, then they'll start to suggest it and promote it to even more people. This effect happens all the time, and when people see these posts with the moral and emotional words, their emotional level is most likely going to go up, leaving people angry, disgusted, etc. When enough people feel this way, a virtual mob essentially forms. But what is very important to note is that when people see these posts, they usually don't look deeper to see the context of the situation, do research on the topic, or just wait for more information to arise. That is the most worrying part of this. They attack anyone who doesn't agree or support their specific view on that topic, whether it's right or wrong. Especially recently, that online hate and anger has boiled over into the real world with people rioting, looting, beating people up, burning buildings, etc. Now let's look at a real example of this and see the consequences. And just as a warning, the consequences aren't pretty and viewer discretion is advised. The example that I'm going to use is controversial to some, but the conclusions and the ramifications are crystal clear. The example that I want to use is the shooting of Jacob Blake on the 23rd of August in Kenosha, Wisconsin. When the story first emerged, a video emerged, as you can see here, of Mr. Blake walking around the front of a car while officers had their service weapons trained on him. All the while he was walking, officers shouted at him to stop and get on the ground. Mr. Blake did not comply with the officers' repeated commands and opened the driver's side door and reached down. When he did reach down, an officer shot him 7 times in the back. Fortunately, Mr. Blake did survive this incident. The first narrative that came out from this story was that Mr. Blake was just stopping a fight between 2 women. He was being a good Samaritan when the police just got there and shot him in cold blood. When this made the rounds throughout social media, there was an extreme amount of outrage with people calling the cops murderers and why didn't they tase him and so on and so forth. Anyone who even dared say that we should just wait for more information to arise was brutally attacked as someone who was uncaring, morally evil, and someone who defended murderers. That night in Kenosha, there were huge protests across the city that started off peaceful, but unfortunately quickly dissolved into rioting and looting, along with people also smashing buildings, even setting some of them on fire. The next day on the 24th, a new video emerged showing a second angle to the incident. As you can see here, the second angle shows police officers trying to push Mr. Blake onto the ground in an attempt to restrain him and put handcuffs on him. Mr. Blake shoved the police officers off and then proceeded to walk around the front of the car as you saw in the previous video. He reached the driver's side door, opened it, and reached down and was shot. That night there were still huge riots across the city of Kenosha and damaging what already was a very damaged city. And all the while, there was still a huge virtual mob on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram attacking anyone who dared disagree. As the days and weeks went by, more evidence emerged from this case. So what actually happened on the 23rd is as follows. On the morning of the 23rd, Mr. Blake entered the house of his ex-girlfriend and according to his ex-girlfriend, attempted to steal her keys and her credit cards. At that moment when he did that, his ex-girlfriend decided to call 911 and the police. When the police got there, she allegedly said, "He's got my kids, he's got my keys." The police officers then went to restrain Mr. Blake, not only because of what his ex-girlfriend said to the 911 dispatcher, but also because he had 3 open warrants. Okay, one for domestic abuse, another one for criminal trespass, and another felony for 3rd-degree sexual assault. The police officers first tried to shout verbal commands at Mr. Blake, telling him to stop and get on the ground. He did not comply. They then tried to physically force him onto the ground in an attempt to restrain him and put handcuffs. That also did not work. Then one officer fired a taser, did not work. Another one fired a taser, did not work. Both tasers did not work. And then as you saw in the last 2 videos that I showed, he started to walk around the front of the car and open the driver's side door and lean down, and then he was shot. As the investigation continued, it became known that there was an actual knife on the floorboard to where he was reaching when he leaned down. All of this information came in the following weeks after the incident. But a vast majority of people did not wait for more information to arise and instead decided to destroy an entire city because of the first thing that they saw on social media. This
These are ramifications of social media where one video can go viral with the help of moral emotional words along with the video, and form a virtual mob, and then a very real mob, and destroy an entire city because they did not wait to see what actually happened in whatever incident occurred. This is very dangerous to the future of any civilized society, especially us here in Canada, US, and Europe. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. And I hope you learned some things, not only of this specific incident that I showed, and but also just in general about how social media works. I hope that in the future you will now wait. When you see a story on social media, you'll now wait and do more research and see the context of the situation before you go to retweet or repost a story. And just in general, just be very skeptical of stories that you see on social media. Thank you for watching this video.